Alright, welcome YouTube. We're testing this out and you got live first. So we're hooking up Instagram here. 1 second. If I had like another person I was doing this with, you could be talking to them while I did it. But instead it's just me, so you gotta wait for a second. I'll put in the description below on this video like where to skip to, so you know, like just fast forward through this part if you're watching and you're not here live. Okay, let's see if this works. Yay! Finally, we had a little spell here of some issues with YouTube and Instagram, and I like being able to have both of them, like being able to like look you in the face no matter where you're watching. So this is really fun for me. Okay, so greatest compliment I've ever gotten, maybe, at least most recently, was last night. I was with a group of gals that many of you have, your groups of ladies that you meet with. Maybe you have discussions, maybe you do wind circles, maybe you do, poetry reading or whatever it is you do, right? But this group of ladies, they've been meeting for almost a year now, they were saying. And I just got invited recently to this particular group. And I've only come, I think this was only my second time going. But it was so fun to be there. And the way that they hold their group is by discussing different episodes of the Faith Matters podcast. And the topic last night was from episode 38, which is, I forgot his first name, McConkey, the younger one, the son, who left and came back. But it was talking about prayer, right? So our discussion was around prayer and what is your prayer life like? What has your experience been? What was it like when you were first starting out prayer, and what is it like now? And it was so fun to hear everybody share their stories and their experiences, and to ask questions, and to see these like common challenges that were coming up. And I loved getting to share like some of my thoughts and experiences. I didn't even realize how some of my practices around prayer had changed until listening to the podcast episode and having this conversation. So it was really fun, like self-discovery experience for me. And I loved this idea of like contemplative prayer versus petitioning prayer. And in the episode, they discuss how there's a role and a purpose for both of those, right? And I had the realization at one point while I was listening to the podcast, this was like my huge aha, was thinking beforehand that this is like where I am, and this is like the thing that I want, right? And so it used to be praying for this thing and like, God, bring this thing to where I am. And I didn't even realize that as I've slowly been changing my belief, that's not even how I think God works anymore. I don't necessarily, it's like a meeting together, right? Of like God bringing us things that we need and us stepping into them, right? And what they were talking about in the episode was how it can feel like some prayers don't get answered for a really long time. And it's only later that we can look back and see like all the little pieces that were happening until or leading up to that prayer being fulfilled, right? And as I was thinking about that, I was so surprised because my mind immediately went, I don't experience that. I don't experience my prayers taking a long time to be answered. And it's funny because I used to connect with that idea a ton. Like it literally shocked me that my brain had a response of like, well, wait, what did you say? No, I don't think that. I feel like my prayers are answered like constantly, all the time, almost instantly. And so I had to like pause for a minute and really reflect on that, like what had changed and what had shifted. And I feel like a big part of it is I've dedicated the last several years of my life of learning to see those small little moments of God bringing me this direction and I'm meeting it, and God bringing me this direction and I meet it, and this thing and I meet it, and this thing and I meet it. And like, it's this tiny little process of walking through, and like, this big thing is still here. And if I look at it, yeah, it still takes a long time to get there. But the difference is my perspective is not on this thing. And oh, it's not there, 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 it's not there. My perspective is now prayer answer, 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 prayer answer. Oh my gosh, hey, the thing I'm experiencing is that thing that a long time ago I once wanted. Right? And it's so that was like one fun thing. And as I was talking about that, we were discussing different ways of like, what do you do when you don't have time to pray? Like, right? Like the shift of, well, actually, before I go there. So I was sharing like how that shift had happened for me, and how a part of it is like, I've made almost a game out of it, of like looking for those moments, those small points of connection that I can have in my spiritual life and spiritual relationship. And so I said that as like fun, right? It's like a game I make out of it. And then we're talking again later, and I'm sharing about how yeah, lots of conversation is going on. I have too many thoughts. I'm trying to like parse it down. I need to make notes better. Like, had in my mind the things I wanted to go over. But anyways, as we were sharing and opening up, somebody asked, like, I love doing journal prayer, right? Like where you write stuff and it's almost like you receive answers as you're writing to the questions. And I love that too. Like, that's another tool that I use all the time. But they were saying that they were in a stage of their life where, you know, she couldn't take that much time right now, and was like, I don't know that I really have prayer in my life right now. And was asking, what are some of the ways that you incorporate prayer when you don't have time to pray like that? And it was fun because this was another moment of like realizing part of my prayer life is, it's like I have experiential prayer now, where the more I have explored my intuition and connecting to it and learning to utilize it in my life, it's like I, again, play all these like little games where sometimes I'll be driving and I'll be like, there's this feeling inside, and it's like a pull. And they actually talked about this in episode 2 on Faith Matters. I was like, oh yes, I know what that is. I have experienced that. And one of the people was speaking, and she said, you know, she would struggle with like, is this a prompting or is this just my mind? And I wasn't sure. And somebody had told her, you know, follow the energy of it. And whatever you feel that, go with that, right? And she's like, and as I've been doing that, oh, it's changed everything and it's been so great. And I was like, yes, that is that same feeling for me. And so oftentimes, you know, when I'm driving, I'll just practice that. And it's like, my mind knows the route and how I want to get there, but I'm practicing letting my intuition or that pull or the spirit guide me in where I want to go. And sometimes it's the same and sometimes it's different. And I had this really cool experience one time where I was going to run errands, and I had, you know, planned out in my mind my route of what's the most efficient way to drive to get to all these different places. And as I'm going along, at one point in my route, I feel to turn a different way. Like the energy pull is saying go this way when I was planning to go that way. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. We'll follow this because I've had enough practice. I've had enough experience. I have enough trust to recognize that, to be able to notice it, know what it is, and know that by following it, better things come than when I don't. Because I had lots and lots of times of recognizing it and realizing what it was and not following it, or, you know, for a long time not recognizing a lot of them. And there's still bits of it. I just had a whole processing thing with my husband this morning about an area of my life where it's like, I wish I was more practiced at being able to recognize this sooner, because I didn't notice something until it was like here. And by that point, it's easier to see because there's all this time has passed by. But it would have been so much nicer if I could have recognized it here and changed things differently, right? And so, anyways, I'm driving, I follow this other path, and I end up discovering that there's another branch to my bank that I didn't know existed that was much closer and a far better route for my errands than the one I had planned on. And so it was just this like cool little thing. And that I realized has become this like experiential prayer. I'll do it when I'm in the grocery store shopping of like what aisles to go down, what products to purchase. And I just kind of feel this like pull towards different items. And sometimes I'll end up purchasing something and that I wasn't planning to, and come to find out like we needed that ingredient, or I wanted to make something later of a new recipe I found, and I didn't even know yet that I was going to need that thing, but I have the thing now because I already bought it. Like, it's the most perfect planning and the most amazing spiritual experience to be able to live in this state. And I realized I was like, this is like that feeling. This is what that scripture is talking about. This is what the sacrament is about. Like, always have the Spirit to be with you. Like, I feel like I'm in this constant state of prayer because it's not petitionary prayer. It's not contemplative prayer. It's experiential prayer. Like, it's relational prayer. It is prayer that I am in communion with in that moment and as I'm moving through my day. And I tried to do that as a kid when I was younger. I tried to figure out like how to always have the Spirit be with you, right? And how to recognize like, is this a thought from the Spirit? Is this a thought from me? And trying to, do all the things of like, okay, well, I'm just going to, any thought I have, I'm just going to pretend like it's one from the Spirit and assume that it is. And like, that just felt chaotic and overwhelming. And it was hard to like, every thought I had, like, how was I supposed to go through every thought I had and figure out, is this a spirit? Is this enough? Like, it was just an overwhelming task, like way too much. And I was describing this with my husband recently, and he's like, I loved his analogy he came up with. He says, it's like an echocardiogram, right? And so it's like measuring the heartbeat, boop, beep, beep, beep. And you don't really notice it when things are good. What you notice is when it flatlines, right? And that's the feeling, is recognizing like, I'm driving along, right? The example I just shared of I've got my errand route all mapped out and I'm driving along and things are, beep, beep, beep. I'm in the flow, right? I'm in that space of alignment. The heartbeat's moving. But then as I'm getting ready to turn this way, flatlines. And it's like, oh, wait, what is that? Something's different here, right? And I experience and perceive that as like something's pulling me in this direction. And it's that contrast from what I had been doing to where this like other pull is that causes that awareness. And so I follow it, right? And that's when I find the branch I didn't know existed, and it's like this better route, right? And so recognizing this idea of like experiential prayer, I was like, oh, that is my favorite type of prayer. And that's not to say that I don't still do contemplative prayer. I actually do a lot of that as well, right? Especially when I'm having a hard time. Well, no, sometimes when I'm having a hard time, I do experiential prayer too. But I usually use like a music playlist for that because I love songs coming on, and I'll put it randomly on shuffle. And it's gotten to the point where, because now I expect that there's going to be a song that'll match whatever I'm needing to hear. Like 90, it's like now to a point of like 98% of the time. It wasn't always that way. It was like 60, 70. I refined the playlist. I've gotten better at tuning in and like finding that space. To me, it's been like a spiritual practice, right? Something you're learning and growing in. But as I've gotten better at it, it's been cool because that song comes on. It's exactly what I needed. And so sometimes my like thing that I do when I'm having a hard time is grab my phone and turn on my playlist. Like, that's my kneeling down in the middle of the airport to pray sort of moment now, but it's just taken on a different type of relationship. Right? And actually the one that I struggle with the most now is petitionary prayer. And I'm wanting to learn that beauty again of taking like what I'm feeling inside me and being able to put it into words, almost like a poetry of like prayer that I'm expressing outwards. Because vocal prayer was something that I had always been raised with and taught with. Like, that's what prayer is, and that's how I studied it, that's how I used it. And but in a lot of ways it felt hollow. Like, it felt much better if I wasn't vocalizing it. The moment I had to turn to vocalizing prayer, it felt dead and remote and insincere, and just, I always have struggled with vocalizing it. But praying in my head, praying in my heart, like, that I could connect to so much more. And finding these other more sort of intangible types of experiential prayer has changed the way I experience prayer. And but I want to be back to practicing that and like developing that, right? So it's like this full circle cycle, right? But anyways, the point of when I was talking with these gals, and I'm describing like these games that I play or different things, or how I just like to have fun with it. One of the gals stops and goes, I love it how you're always like having fun in what you're doing in your prayer life. And I was like, yes, my spiritual life is very fun. And I like paused to think about that reflection, because that was actually an intentional goal that I've been working on for the last couple of years. And I've really been like detoxing from my life struggle and hardship. Like, I'm done with it. Life to me is meant to have ease. It is meant to have satisfaction. It is meant to have joy. That is meant to be the operating default system. And I'll talk more about what that is, because sometimes when I say that, people are like, sounds like you're ignoring part of reality and you're not being emotionally healthy and things like that. And hang on, right? We're not getting rid of negative emotion. We're not saying that there isn't still that thrill of challenge and like working towards something, right? I still have those experiences, but I don't struggle. Like, it was almost as if I had this addiction to struggle in a way, and hardship, that there was something pious about that and sacred in the struggle. And it's funny because when I say it like that, the sacred struggle, I do believe in like a sacred struggle. Like, there's a piece of that and a part of it. But the struggle that I detoxed from was more of this, that things have to be hard. And the way I was describing it was using an analogy from when I was 7, and I was boating with my cousins at Lake Powell here in Utah. Massive, massive big lake, right? And you've got this inner tube thing. It's not a circle, anyway. Tube behind the boat. Doesn't matter exactly what it looked like, right? But it's got a tube. You float on it. You have your life jacket. There's handles on it that you hold on to. And it's my first time going, and everybody tells me, whatever you do, make sure you don't let go, right? I'm like, okay, I can do that. Like, it's gonna be a fun ride. Okay, here we go, right? So we're going along, and all of a sudden we hit the wake of the boat, which is behind the boat. The water like comes up on the side and makes like really big waves, and it can be fun if you're water skiing or wakeboarding or tubing, even, to like ride on the waves. Now, we were trying, because it was like little kids, they were trying to keep us like in the center where the water isn't as choppy, right? But we hit the wake, and when we did, it flipped us over, and I'm underneath the water, and all my other cousins like immediately let go, but I was like, okay, I'm gonna be obedient. They told me to stay safe. I need to hold on, so I'm gonna stay holding on. And I'm holding and I'm holding, and I'm being dragged underneath the water, right? And I can't breathe. And finally, I let go, because I'm like, I've got to get some oxygen. And I'm wearing my life jacket, so I pop right up out of the water, gasping for air, The boat's coming around to get me, to pull me back in, and we can go back out again and try it, right? But I was describing, like, that's what the difference in my life feels like. Is like, before, so much of my life was under the water, and like the good thing was, how much can you hold on? And then every time, periodically, something good would happen in your life, you'd be like, oh, this is so amazing, this is so good, I'm not having to try so hard, and things are great. And then the next thing you know, it's like, something happened in life, it flipped me over, and I'm back under the water, and I just have to hold on, right? And the majority of my life experience was viewed through this lens of like, the good thing to be doing is holding on tight there. And I feel like I've flipped that perspective in my experience, and it's like the same things still happen, right? My life, I didn't get rid of the wake, right? It's still a fundamental part of boating, right? Or being alive, that there are still times where the water is bumpier and times where it's smoother. And sometimes we can navigate which one we want to be in a little bit more than others, right? We have some influence, if not direct control, right? We're not driving the boat. Right? But that what happens now is like the moment I flip, I let go, I get off, and I reset the thing, and I'm back on before you know it. And so the majority of my time is spent in an enjoyable place, boating. And it's like the moment something flatlines, the moment something starts to get too difficult or too hard, it's like, nope, I'm done. This isn't right now. This isn't the right moment. This isn't the right option. This isn't the right person. Let's reset and try this again. I've had it happen even on things like trying to get a bank loan for my business. And at one point, I'm calling them up. And when I'm talking to the person, they're like, don't know what I'm talking about and can't answer my questions, and they're having trouble on their computer. When it gets to like kids interrupting or problems with electronics, that's when I'm like, that's another flatlining signal for me. Like, things are not right. And so I start having those problems, and I'm like, you know what? Actually, things are kind of busy for me right now. It's okay. I'm going to call back. I'll try again. Right? So I hang up. I wait until I'm in a better feeling space. And that's part of the piece of it for me is my emotions in a lot of ways help guide me and help me see, am I in the heartbeat space or have I flatlined? Right? Negative emotion to me is like the rumble strips. It's letting you know, hey, you're getting off of that path of greatest allowance, of direction, of divine union, of partnership, and following God's will, however you want to think about it, right? It's that energetic pull of trying to help guide you through life. And so I hadn't been feeling, perfect. I was like, this feeling good enough. Let's give it a shot, right? So I wait till I feel kind of that pull of like, okay, try calling again. I call again. I get a person who's amazing, who knows right away, like what they're talking about, what they're doing, and we're filling out the form really well. The computer's working great. They come back to me and they're like, hey, do you want me to actually try for this higher amount instead of this lower one? I was like, I didn't even think I was going to get this one. I hadn't even considered that. And I was like, sure, let's try for that. Let's see what can happen, right? Let's see where this goes. I'm open to it. And in that moment, it was so, and it comes back. I end up getting approved for the higher amount. I was like, oh, this is great. This is awesome. I have all this capital now to work with my business. And so it was just this moment of like the contrast between the two experiences, right? The other one, there was struggle, there were road trips, there was blocks, there were these hard things, right? And those blocks and road trips still happen in life, right? It's not like they're gone, but I read them differently. Instead of seeing them as like something I have to muscle through and conquer and like, oh, look what I accomplished here. I view them now as like, that's a signal. Let's try this a different way. I want to reroute this. And another way I have to describe it when my groups are working with clients is it's like, I feel like it's the experience is being in a river with a canoe. And like life is going down this river. That's the journey. And that there are times where it's like the river is empty of water, right? It's all blocked up. The water is not really flowing through. There's just like a couple like splurts kind of trying to break through, but the majority of it is blocked up. So you don't have a good flow of water, and instead you have this riverbed that's full of like lots of rocks. And you have a canoe that you're trying to get down the riverbed. And so it's like, look at me, I'm carrying my canoe, and like I've managed to get these like awesome hiking boots that make it so I'm less likely to twist my ankle as I'm going down the river, right? And look at us, we've got together and we've created this ramp to smooth out your journey down the river, and like all these different things. And there is sense of satisfaction and like joy that can come from building that way. And I lived life that way for a long time. But then to have the realization, I could just learn to unblock the river, right? And let more of the water flow. And then I can put my boat in the river. And now, it carries me places, right? And there's still rocks. And I still got to kind of navigate around them. And there's new skills that you have to learn of, like learning to read the rapids. And sometimes you get thrown out of it and there's the threat of drowning, which it's like, No, thank you. Maybe I don't want to unblock this water because at least before I never was going to drown. Like that wasn't an issue. I wasn't really worried about that. And now there's this whole big scary issue I have to deal with, right? And it's like, well, you pick like what's the thing you want to deal with? Not drowning or not twisting your ankle. Like they're both acceptable ways to journey through it, but I just have loved learning to live this life where it's so much more this ease and this partnership and this divine direction, and it feels so much more like I'm really guided in my life, that is the majority of my experience. And I feel like that's been one of the most significant things in my life, has been this experience of releasing struggle. And so last night when I was with these friends and they're talking, they're like, your spiritual life is just so fun. Like you're just constantly doing all these things. And it was like another realization to me of, well, I think I want to take the gospel at its best, right? I really want to believe it's the plan of happiness, not like eventually you will be happy because you have followed the plan properly and now you get to have your eternal happiness that you've arrived at. Like, no, it's the plan of like, we're going to have fun together. We're going to enjoy this life experience. Like, even looking at it from like a family perspective, if it's my journey here, my heavenly parents sent me here, like I'm in relationship with them, the majority of the time it's like it's good, it should be good, right? If they are, the most perfect parents, it's not that human infallibility of families like it's difficult. Like men are that they might have joy. We are supposed to feel joy. We are supposed to feel good. I feel like spirituality, the more spiritual I become, the more my spiritual well-being and development grows and flourishes, the more of my life I am experiencing joy. I am experiencing that sense of satisfaction and fulfillment and purpose and meaning and just like a life force, a liveliness. Like even when my physical faculties and bodies are drained and weak, like there's this spiritual peace that can come through and bring that aliveness. And, I think of that as Christ as the living water and as even the word of wisdom, right? That you will walk and not be weary and run and not faint. Like forgetting it as a dietary thing, but viewing it as like a spiritual fulfillment promise. Like when you are spiritually fulfilled and aligned, you have this greater increase of energy and capacity to be able to do things beyond just your human faculties and capabilities. And so when I think about specifically women as leaders and matriarchs, there's been this just thought and feeling on my mind and heart so much that just keeps getting stronger and stronger over the years and months and weeks and now days, of this sense of like, oh, there's even, I just had the realization, I thought about it beforehand, there's a quote from a talk. I wish I could remember whose it was. It was in one of the General Women's sessions. It was given by a woman. I can't remember what it was, but it was the one part of the talk later in. I don't know if you remember, of like the swimmers, and they made like a human chain and they went out and rescued some people, right? It's that one. Do you remember it? But I think in reference to it, she was referring to the like prophecy from President Kimball. Which they made the video a couple of years ago around it. And there's one part of this where it talks about much of the growth, and I like to always add growth and expansion because in energetics, you have the masculine and feminine component. Masculine is growth, feminine is expansion, and they're partnered, and anytime you have one, you have the other. So much of the growth and expansion that's coming to the church in future years will be largely due to the women of the church partnering with the good and faithful women of the world, and showing how they live in like joyful and happy ways. Like, can't remember exactly, but something along those lines, right? And that idea has just like sparked something in me so much, especially when I think about the struggle and the feeling of this faith journey that I see so many women in like a bigger way than feels like ever before, feeling that pull and this call towards of finding that connection to Heavenly Mother and tapping into their own spiritual authority and connection and relationship and that experiential part of spirituality that isn't as much, maybe what we're used to, right? And how there's these cycles and patterns of like, well, if you go down this journey or you go down this path or you start seeking Heavenly Mother, then you're going to, eventually end up at a place where you hate the church, you hate men, and you're going to leave the church, right? Like that to some people I feel like is the viewpoint, and that's like a lot of the common experience and common pathway, and there's a lot of valid reasons why that's a pattern and why that's the common thing that things show up as. But I would just like have felt such this desire of like, no, that is not what it is supposed to be. It is supposed to be, we are so unashamedly joyful, happy in the way we are living our lives, that it is the whole point and part of the feminine is to attract it, right? She pulls in the things that she needs to her, right? And to like shine so brightly and so brilliantly that people are asking and wanting to know, who are you? What is this? Will you bring so much goodness into my life? I love being in a relationship with you. I love seeing what you are. And I feel like there's a bit of that heritage already in the idea around the women in the church. It's just the next unfolding, unveiling layer of that, of saying like, this is what we can blossom into now. And paralleling that along with this previous idea that it's been like every couple of generations, it feels like a woman has to rediscover some of these experiences of what it is to be a woman in the church and understanding like, oh, we're not alone, and oh, there's other people here. And it's like, this should be the last generation that happens, right? The last time that a generation discovers their Heavenly Mother, discovers a relationship and connection with her, and thinks that they are like the first wave to have ever really done this or experienced it, to not realize, oh my goodness, this happened in the 80s and 90s, this happened in the 60s and 70s, like this has been happening for a long time, right? That this isn't something new, right? And sometimes I think it's easy to get focused on thinking, well, then this has to change, and 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 that has to change. And the idea that's just been impressed on my heart so much recently is like, there's one thing we can do, is just break that singular cycle, right? To say that from here on out, women will know, right? Our daughters, our granddaughters, they will know that it's not the first time. They will grow up hearing this, they will grow up knowing this, and I see that already happening so much more in so many more families and experiences. Just a minute, Bud, if you need something, Dad's in charge. Go check in with him. Oh, it's little baby. I thought it was my bigger one. It's my little bitty baby. I'm gonna have to go check on him. But to, like, if we do accomplish that, nothing else, just that, like, everything else just falls into place from there. And if we can do it in this way of we are joyful and we're happy, and people begin to see and experience like, oh, well, you got this way because it started with your Heavenly Mother journey? Like, I had no idea. I didn't realize that. Really, tell me more. I would like to know more, right? Instead of trying, because there's, again, a piece of the feminine. It has to be experienced in order to be fully understood. It can't be quite defined or described. You need to have your own personal experiences. And I think that's part of what women talk about when they're like, I don't necessarily want revelation telling me about her, describing it or whatnot. Like, I like that it is my own experience, my own connection. I feel like that's a piece of what we're touching on when we say that. And so, we then try to say, well, you need to have this experience. You need to believe me about my experiences. And I think that's going at it the wrong direction, right? Hoping that we will then arrive in a place of like, oh, I see the goodness and I see the connection here. And now we have a positive relationship. And I feel like if we go the other way and we're sharing that and we're being that and we're showing up more in that way, then it naturally becomes people ask us questions. And instead of us trying to say and stand up for some of the things, and again, there's always two pieces of this, right? I have friends who like have conversations with their stake presidents and bishops and like are sharing things, right? And I share things and talk to people in my family and in my ward, and right, there's not to say like don't stop doing some of those more tangible aspects of it. The piece of it is shifting like the focus and the why and maybe some of the how, so that it's like the purpose isn't like, oh, we're fighting this thing and we need it to happen, but the whole goal is we are joyfully showing up all the time. We are bringing goodness into every area that we go, whether it's inside the church, outside of the church, like wherever your path or journey has taken you, is taking you there for a reason, right? I think that's another thing that the sisters and women right now have this beautiful potential is to really say, okay, again, we're going to take the church's doctrine at face value in every bit. We're all brothers and sisters. Okay, that means regardless of if you've been baptized, if you're an official member of this organization, you are my sibling, and I'm going to care about you, and I'm going to treat you as such, and I'm going to talk with you about such, and I'm going to care about you, I'm going to interact with you, instead of this sometimes us versus them world piece that sort of shows up there. And I think that there are women who are being called into more of those spheres and places, right? They're being directly guided to not be engaging as much in the organization, world, cultural LDS piece of it, that they're supposed to be working with them in here, connecting with them here, connecting with them here. The same way I feel like there are women who are being called and told to stay here, that this is your place and you need to be helping and you need to be building it here. And I feel like as we all come together and join with one another, that's wherever we are and whatever those pieces are, like that's the connection, that's the community, that's the building up of Zion, right? The gathering of Israel, the gathering of all of our children, all of their children, right? Bringing that into that relationship and doing it from this like joyful place. And so to me, like part of how you have that capacity for such great joy and for such great light is by being able to not struggle and suffer through the hardship, the pain, the processing, right? From the energetics perspective, it's like it's just an emotion, it's just an energy that's moving through you, right? And you're allowed to move through, and it's like, oh, okay, it's moved through and it's good, and we move on, right? And it's that attachment that amplifies it and strengthens it, and lots of things we could go into. But the point of all of this is to say, like, I feel there is such a beautiful potential here, and like today has just been a little bit of mulling over all of these different ideas and what things could become, where they could go, and what those directions are like. And I think the more of us connecting, having these conversations, sharing these ideas, sharing these potentials, feeling what are you feeling, what are you feeling, how are you coming from, like that's how we spark that light. We spread it, we amplify it, we grow it in one another. And I look forward to the unfolding of the next several years and decades and potential beyond that of seeing what becomes of that. And for me, that is that shifting of the experience. It's being on top of the inner tube of where is this going? What are we going to do? Rather than this feeling of, I'm being dragged underground all the time and I can't stand this and I can't breathe. Right? Anyways, those are some of my random musings and thoughts today. I would love to hear from yours in the comments below. And if you're interested in like exploring more of the ideas, learning how to shift some of your thoughts and how to spend more of your time on top of the water rather than being dragged underneath, or how to get that water flowing in your river and start learning to live life in the flow instead of carrying your canoe, or learning how to better recognize when you're in sync with that heartbeat and when it's flatlining, right? that's what I do. So this is all about. I love helping people learn to recognize this. For me, growing up, spirituality and your connection to God and receiving revelation and the Spirit and whatever was all sort of intangible and not quite solid, and was like, I don't know how you figured it out. And I've loved learning energetics to have this like more form around it, more structure in place, more of like, oh, I understand there's a process and there's pieces here and I can move through them and I can understand how to utilize them, but it's also in a way that doesn't feel like it's limiting or boxing you in or defining like this is the way you have to do it or what it is. It's like, here's a little bit of structure and template that can help you in that spiritual journey, thinking about it differently. And so I do workshops 4 times a month, and they're wonderful, where we explore these ideas, we develop them, we practice them, all sorts of tools and techniques to help you. Sometimes we do challenges like grocery shopping challenges or different intuition ones to help you strengthen that. We do it in this way where life is fun, right? And reframing so many of these difficult situations into what is the goodness that this is unfolding for me. Right? That conversation with a friend earlier today where we're both just sharing like really hard stuff that had just been happening, but it was so fun because it was in this place where we both had this perspective of like, dang, it was so good. You're not going to believe this like intense thing we went through. It was so great because we're releasing all this stuff, which means we're getting room for all this goodness coming. And there was this reconciliation and all these positive things that resulted afterwards. And it becomes, instead of this like addiction to the struggle and the hardship and look at how much I can bear and how heavy my cross is, to like, look at how much expansion is unfolding. Look at what I am moving through. Look at how much we're having. And the piece that comes with that is it happens in relationship, right? So it becomes the more people you're connected with, the more people are amplifying that way, right? And to me, that's a lot of the piece of the church and the gospel, love, right? And that what has just been difficult is that for a lot of people feeling like there was one framework that we were all kind of on, and as long as you were within that framework, they could experience it, the things were there. And outside we've shifted and there's this other framework, and it's like, how can we translate, how can we connect, how can we, like, there's not a unifying of a thing anymore, it can feel like, for a lot of people. And so a lot of people view it as like, well, this is the framework and this is the other one, and I guess that means I have to leave by in this framework. And I don't believe that. I think there is a greater framework at core, at the heart, right? And that both are tapping into it, but they're tapping into it from these different perspectives, that masculine and feminine, and that they intertwine and interweave together, and they can have this beautiful dance with each other, right? I love teaching people to understand masculine and feminine language and perspective and experience so that you can better navigate how do you dance with those things together when you understand them, instead of feeling like they're so antithetical to one another. And it also makes it easier then when there are those points of difference or contention or wounding or problems or contrasts that do need to be adjusted, that are saying, hey, we could be doing this better. Hey, we're not in alignment, right? We're flatlining in this area. That's why it feels so terrible. That's why it seems like something's off, right? What is that information? What is that data that we can collect? And how can we learn to better utilize that to make improvements and advancements? And how do we do that in places where it feels like you're not the one who gets to make the decision, or you can't create the change? That's another idea I got rid of, right? Like, that was limiting me. And I chose not to play in it anymore. And it's opened up so many more possibilities, right? It's that water. If I'm focused on the rock in front of me, this rock has to move before I can get past it, then no, I'm going to struggle. And it's like God has been teaching me, that's fine. We can wait here. We can wait on this rock. This rock is eventually going to be moved or passed or whatever. Or I can flow you around it. Like, I can. And to me, it was, I was getting stuck saying the rock had to move. And I wasn't allowing God to show me the ways the water could move around. And when I learned to tap into that, and I learned to trust that, a lot more doors open, a lot more miracles, a lot more experiences that I had been wanting, a lot less limitations. So maybe that's another one I'll talk about. I detox struggle. a detoxed limitation. There's a few others I bet if I thought about it. But it's made a lot of a difference. And I think there's a lot of you who are on similar journeys in recognizing these things, right? Abundance, right? There's another one. That's the flip side, the thing you're choosing, like a growth mindset. But when we start just choosing to operate in this different place, to me, it's we're living up to the fulfillment of the gospel in a greater level, in a higher capacity. And the more that we do that, the more love and light that is going to be seen and experienced, the more that becomes the dominant experience, the more people begin asking, what is it that about you that's different? What is it that, how did you learn this? How did you become this? And now we're not trying to be like, well, did you know? Hey, this is valid. This is important. It's like, oh my gosh, the evidence is all around you. What is going on over here? Like, there's something happening. And that's the vision I have for the women of the world, really, but especially for the women who have a background with the LDS Church, because I feel like that's been our desire and is a part of that purpose and goal to bring that about in a greater way, to let everyone know you can have this, you can experience this, not to just say we have this and we can experience this if you would like to join us, right? But to be actively sharing in experience and relationship. And anyways, I could talk about this. We've been here already 46 minutes, which I'm loving having this YouTube thing here because it's got my little timer. I could watch that a lot more. If you want to share, if you want to like this, love to have you. Again, if you want to watch the replay, sometimes it's easier on YouTube, and sometimes when you're sharing it, it's easier for people to see things on YouTube. So it's Emily Carolyn Baker on YouTube, and which I'm being reminded I never updated that with changing my Instagram handle. I might update that. But for now, Emily Carolyn Baker. And like I said, if you want to learn more about how to develop your intuition, how to live life in this way, how to change that relationship so it really is this cooperative, co-creative one, whether it's with you and God, whether it's with developing this intuition, getting into this state of flow, learning to live from that place, learning to feel that sense of guiding and direction and how to move through it in greater. That's what I'm all about. So I'm going to be officially opening up next round of my program and sharing some different things of how we work together. If you want to be the first to know, comment details below. I'd love to share with it. You can also book a time to chat for more details with the link in my bio. Till then, take care. Blah. Blah. Oh, hi YouTube. You got to see all of that. This is me sitting here going, I can't believe I talked that long. I wanted to do this shorter. There are other things I wanted to do today, right? This is that next wave, right? So again, it's not like things are always joyous. It's that I know, hey, this experience that I'm having right now, this emotion that I'm feeling, it's letting me know there's something off on it. But I have to let myself feel it, and I have to let myself move through it. And so I feel it, and I emote it, and I allow it, and I be in it, and then it comes out better. So right now, I know I need to feel some of this, and that's what's going to give me the clarity of how to be utilizing the rest of my time. Have a wonderful day.